Woke up to my mom yelling to my dad about how she hates me. I'm 18 and I'm leaving in 2 days. It's not something I want to do, but it's something I have to do because no matter how many hours I work, no matter how hard I try, I will never be able to afford everything my parents expect me to pay for every month. They don't just expect me to cover rent, utilities, food, and my own living expenses. They want me to pay for everything and still drive my 13 and 14-year-old siblings everywhere, on my dime. They go to school 45 minutes away from where we live, and somehow it's always on me to drive them. I've been working full-time, trying to save up, trying to figure out how to manage everything, but it's impossible. This morning, I woke up to the sound of my mom screaming. I could hear her voice echoing through the house, loud and furious, calling me every name under the sun, saying that I'm ungrateful, that I'm selfish, that I'm throwing everything away. "She's an ungrateful butch," she yelled. I love my mom, I really do, but I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells around her. She has a way of blowing up over the smallest things, and her automatic response to any situation, no matter how big or small, is to insult me. It's like she can't see me as her daughter anymore, just someone to blame when things aren't going the way she wants. She says I'll never amount to anything, that I'm just throwing my future away. I try not to take it personally, but it cuts deep every single time. My dad, well, I don't know where he stands. He's always been so hard to read. He doesn't show emotions, never has. I've never seen him cry, never seen him show anything other than a cold, stoic face. I know he's upset about me leaving. He doesn't want me to go because he doesn't believe I can survive on my own without their help. He thinks I'm still too young, too naive. But I feel like I have no choice. No matter what I do, nothing is ever enough for them. I love my parents. I love them so damn much, but I'm suffocating under their expectations. It's my mom's constant criticism and her refusal to see me as anything other than a burden that's pushing me to leave. I do more around the house than my 14-year-old brother, who can't even seem to wash himself properly. It's not that I mind helping out. My parents need help, but it's the constant burden on me, and the way my mom belittles me for not doing enough. Meanwhile, my sister is hardly ever home. She's always at her friend's house or playing soccer, and I'm the one left behind to take care of everything. Before the accident, before my car was totaled in that crash, I used to drive them everywhere. I was the one who drove them to all their friends' houses, to their sports practices, to school, and where we live, nothing is close. It's at least 45 minutes to get anywhere. It's exhausting. Thank God my brother's friends all live within walking distance. But that doesn't make it easier because I feel like I'm the only one carrying the weight. I'm the only one who's trying to make it work, and no one sees it. I'm just the one who gets yelled at when things don't go perfectly, the one who's expected to do everything, and then gets torn down for it. I'm tired. I'm so tired. I haven't even left my room yet. I'm just laying here, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I should cry, but I know that if I do, it's only going to make everything worse. The tears won't change anything. They won't make me feel any better. They won't make her stop yelling. They won't make my dad see me as an adult. They won't make my brother grow up. I don't want to cry. But at the same time, I feel like I should. I feel like I'm on the edge of breaking down. I feel like I'm being torn in two. On one hand, I'm desperate to get out of here, to live my life without the constant barrage of insults, the never-ending demands, the feeling of never being good enough. But on the other hand, I love my family, and the thought of leaving them behind, of being completely on my own, is terrifying. I'm scared. I don't know if I'm ready for this, but I don't feel like I have any other option. I just want to breathe again. I just want to live a life that's mine, not one dictated by their expectations and their anger. I don't want to keep being the punching bag. I don't want to keep being the one who is expected to give everything, but never receives anything in return. I need to find my own space, my own peace, and I need to stop letting them make me feel like I'm the one in the wrong for wanting that. Update 1. I can relate to what you're going through, maybe more than you'd think. I'm the oldest of 5, and my parents were incredibly abusive as well. Emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically. I use the word abusive intentionally because that's exactly what they were, and it sounds harsh, but it's the truth. What your parents are doing to you, it's abuse. And I know it feels like you're trapped, like there's nowhere to turn, but I promise you, you're not alone in this. I was kicked out when I was 17. It wasn't something I planned or wanted, but it happened after I finally confronted them about the emotional and mental mistreatment they subjected me to for years. For most of my childhood, I was their punching bag, their scapegoat. The abuse didn't always come in the form of physical violence. It was the constant verbal and emotional cruelty, the belittling, the neglect. It tore away at my self-esteem and, to be honest, at my ability to trust people in general. I spent so many nights crying in silence, hoping that one day they'd see me as something more than a nuisance. When I confronted them, I thought it would lead to some kind of breakthrough, some honest conversation, but instead it was like they had been waiting for a reason to push me out of the house. It felt like they were relieved that I'd finally made it so obvious that I couldn't take it anymore. So, I was out. At 17, I was left to figure out how to survive with no support, no safety net, just the promise I had made to myself to never let them control me again. But leaving was hard. It was brutal. I wasn't prepared for the weight of having to figure everything out on my own, especially when it felt like the whole world had just turned its back on me. The damage done by years of neglect and emotional abuse took a long time to heal. It still affects me, even now, years later. The relationship with my parents was fractured for nearly a decade. They didn't change, not really, until after my wedding. That was when things came to a head, when I pointed out in front of everyone the enormous discrepancy between the way they treated me and how they treated my siblings. It was painful to do, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. I needed to say it, needed them to hear it. My wedding was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I invited almost 50 family members, people who had been part of my life for years, and only 15 showed up. It was crushing. My stepdad, the one man who was supposed to protect me, left early. Right after dinner, he got up, didn't even say goodbye, and went to buy weed from a legal dispensary. It still stings when I think about it. On the other hand, my wife's side of the family showed up in full force, almost 75 people, and 70 of them came. The difference was night and day, and it wasn't just in numbers. It was in the feeling, the support. The contrast between how they treated me and how they treated my sister hit me hard. That summer, they paid for every single cent of my sister's wedding, which cost nearly $20,000, while my wife and I scraped together just $6,000 for ours. And the cherry on top, my mom officiated my sister's wedding. Every family member I knew was there, and it was a gorgeous celebration. But then there was the aftermath. My sister's marriage, the one that seemed so perfect from the outside, crumbled. 9 months after the wedding, they divorced. Her husband had been emotionally abusive the entire time, but it didn't stop there. On the night of the bachelor party, my stepdad pulled my sister's ex-husband aside and told him that he was the son he never had. My wife and I were in the same room, witnessing this, and it shattered me. It was like all the love, all the support my sister received was a lie, a performance, and I was just the outsider, the one who never fit in. That wasn't the worst of it. The worst part came the day I graduated high school. It was supposed to be a moment of pride, a turning point. Instead, I was told by my biological father, the man who had barely been in my life, that I would never amount to anything. It crushed me, but it also fueled me. None of my parents had a high school diploma. My mom and stepdad had to settle for their GEDs. But I pushed through, went to college, got a degree in STEM, and now I'm working on my second and third degrees with plans to keep going. I've applied to grad school, and I'm working towards a PhD. Every step I take it in defiance of everything they told me I couldn't do. So here's my advice to you. First, your siblings aren't the problem. The way your parents treat them compared to you is not your siblings' fault. It's not about them, it's about your parents' choice to treat you unfairly. Don't carry the weight of resentment towards them. They're just kids too. It's your parents who have decided to make you the target of their anger, their neglect. Don't let them become the excuse for everything wrong in your life. Second, when your mom says, "You won't amount to anything," don't believe her. Don't let her words take root in your soul. You are not defined by what they say or do. Keep moving forward, even when it feels like you're walking through mud. The future is yours to build, and it's one that doesn't involve their approval or their cruelty. You will prove her wrong. I'm living proof of that. I know what it feels like to be trapped, to think that there's no way out, but I promise you, there is. I know that right now it feels impossible, and I know how heavy the burden of all of this is. But you have everything inside you to rise above it. You have the strength, the determination, the ability to thrive. It won't be easy, not at first, but it will get better. The moment you step away, the moment you finally break free from their hold, it will all start to shift. You will feel lighter, freer, and then you will realize that you've always had everything you needed to succeed. You just needed to get out from under their shadow to see it. You are capable. You are worthy. And one day when you've made it, when you're living your life on your terms, you'll look back and realize that this pain was the moment you took control of your own destiny. You will be free. Update 2. I completely understand what you're going through, and I want you to know you're not alone in this. It's a tough situation to be in, especially when you're constantly walking on eggshells, trying to keep everything in balance. My mother also suffers from panic attacks, and it's a challenge. She gets overwhelmed, and when that happens, she often lashes out, yelling, calling me names, making it feel like everything's my fault, even when it clearly isn't. She doesn't mean to hurt me, I know that. But it doesn't change the fact that her reactions are hurtful, and it leaves me feeling helpless, like I'm walking a tightrope, trying to soothe her while also trying to maintain my own sense of self. It's difficult, to say the least, but I'm still trying to understand her. I try to help her manage her panic, to give her the space she needs, but it's exhausting. That's the thing about mothers like this. They're often deeply overprotective. They act the way they do not because they want to ruin your life, but because something in their past, whether it be bad experiences or even deep-seated trauma, makes them feel the need to control every aspect of their children's lives. They believe that by controlling you, they can keep you safe, keep you from making mistakes. In their eyes, it's love, but the truth is, it's a form of control. And as you grow older, especially at 17, it becomes incredibly frustrating and draining. You start to feel suffocated, like you can't breathe without their approval, without their constant supervision. I can't even imagine what it must feel like to be the second mother in the house, constantly having to care for siblings when that shouldn't even be your job. You're not their caretaker, yet it feels like you've been handed the responsibility that belongs to your parents. It's one thing to help out when things get tough, to pitch in a little and ease their burden, but when you're expected to take care of your siblings, especially when they're old enough to be responsible for themselves, it crosses a line. It becomes too much. You shouldn't have to be the one to make sure your younger siblings are washing themselves, eating, or getting their chores done. It's not your job, and frankly, it's not your responsibility. And take, for example, your 14-year-old sibling not knowing how to bathe properly. At that age, they should be capable of handling such basic things themselves. If they can't manage these simple tasks, that's on your parents, not you. Their lack of care and attention is what's leading to this situation. It's not fair for you to bear the brunt of their failures. You shouldn't feel guilty for stepping away, for moving out. It's not about abandoning them, but about giving yourself the chance to breathe, to live your own life without constantly being weighed down by responsibilities that aren't yours to carry. When you're always expected to be the responsible one, it's easy to start believing that you're the only one who can fix things. But the truth is, sometimes people don't learn until they're left to deal with the consequences of their own actions. It's like a parent who never lets their child fail. Without that failure, the child doesn't learn the hard lessons. And in a way, that's what's happening here. Your parents haven't learned how to set boundaries or how to allow their children to grow into responsible individuals. Instead, they've put the burden on you, expecting you to be the one to fix everything, to be the one to step up. But that's too much for any one person, especially someone who's still just trying to figure out their own life. You have every right to step back and put your own needs first. Moving out doesn't make you a traitor. It's a sign that you're taking control of your own life, that you're no longer willing to be trapped in a cycle of over-responsibility and emotional exhaustion. You're not abandoning them. You're simply choosing to take care of yourself for once. And that's okay. You're allowed to prioritize your own mental and emotional health. Sometimes the best thing you can do for everyone, including your parents and siblings, is to step away and let them face the reality of their own situation. They'll have to figure it out without you holding everything together. And as hard as it may seem, it's the only way they'll learn to stand on their own. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for doing what's best for you. You deserve the space to grow, to explore your own life without the constant pressure of being responsible for everyone else. It might feel like the hardest thing you've ever done, but in the long run, it will be the healthiest choice for you. Moving out isn't about leaving them behind, it's about finding the space to live your own life on your terms. You can still love them and support them, but you need to find your own path first. And that in itself is a victory. You're not giving up, you're choosing yourself. Update 3. Your situation reminds me so much of my own childhood, especially when I think about how my narcissistic mother treated me. I am the oldest of 8 kids, and growing up, I was essentially treated like free childcare, expected to watch my younger siblings constantly, help with their needs, and be the responsible one while my parents did nothing. It was as if my entire existence was reduced to one function: to serve everyone else. My mother would criticize me relentlessly, making me feel like nothing I did was good enough. I would clean the house, make sure my younger siblings were fed, help with their homework, and still, nothing was ever appreciated. Instead, she would shower my much younger siblings with praise, treating them like little angels while making me out to be the problem child, the one who couldn't do anything right. It was as though she could never be satisfied, and no matter what I did, I was always falling short. My father, on the other hand, just sat back and let it happen. He was always the silent observer, never stepping in to protect me from her harsh words or actions. He didn't want to rock the boat. He didn't want to disrupt the delicate balance that had somehow been created where my mother had all the control. So he let her treat me however she wanted, and I grew to resent both of them for it. When I turned 18, things only got worse. My parents had the audacity to ask me to pay rent while I was in school full-time, working part-time, and trying to cover my own student loans. They didn't help me financially in any way. Not once did they offer to contribute or help me out, even though they knew how difficult it was. I was already struggling with an undiagnosed sleep disorder, constantly exhausted, and on the verge of burnout. I would spend days feeling drained, unable to function properly, but no one cared. I was just expected to keep going. And then one Saturday morning, after a long week of juggling everything, my mother woke me up at the crack of dawn and demanded I watch my younger siblings again. I had barely gotten any sleep, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I snapped. I had been holding it in for so long, trying to keep up with their impossible expectations, trying to be the perfect daughter, but it was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I told her I was done. I couldn't do it anymore, and when I tried to leave, she said the words that I will never forget: "Never come back." It felt like a slap in the face, but at that moment, something inside of me clicked. I was done. I didn't go back. I packed up my things and moved in with my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband of 19 years. That was the best decision I ever made. I went no contact with my parents almost 9 years ago, and it was the best thing I've ever done for myself. It wasn't easy, and it hurt at first. The guilt weighed on me, and I wondered if I was making a mistake, but over time, I realized just how toxic that relationship had become. My mother had always made me feel small, like I didn't matter, but stepping away, leaving it all behind, was like a weight being lifted off my chest. For the first time in my life, I was able to breathe, to exist without the constant pressure of trying to live up to someone else's unrealistic expectations. You deserve so much better than what you're going through right now. You don't deserve to be treated like a servant or a scapegoat for their emotional baggage. You deserve to be happy, to be loved, and to be respected for who you are, not just for what you can do for them. It's going to be hard, but I promise you, once you take that step, things will get better. It might take time to heal, but you will find peace, and you will find people who truly appreciate you and treat you the way you deserve to be treated. Leaving them behind doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means that you love yourself enough to put your own needs first. And trust me, once you cut them out of your life, you will feel a sense of freedom and relief that you've never experienced before. It won't be easy, but in the long run, it will be the best decision for your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. I wish you all the best on your journey. You are stronger than you know, and you are worthy of so much more than they have ever given you. Take care of yourself. You are enough. Update 4. 13 years ago, I was exactly where you are now, feeling trapped, exhausted, and utterly undervalued by the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. My parents made me pay half of everything, from the rent to the utilities and even the groceries. It wasn't enough that I was already a full-time student. I also had to contribute financially, or else I wasn't allowed to eat there. Imagine that, being denied the basic right to food in your own home because you weren't earning enough to meet their demands. It was absolutely draining. My mother, who was always looking for someone to help her, insisted that I work full-time while I was still finishing my senior year in high school. She wanted me to help pay bills and cover expenses since my father had lost his job and started his own business. She didn't seem to understand that I was still a teenager, trying to finish school, figure out who I was, and survive the overwhelming pressure of growing up. But none of that mattered to her. She came home from work expecting me to have dinner ready, the laundry done, and the house spotless. And it didn't end there. I was expected to take care of my little brother, who was only a few months old at the time. I had to handle everything she was too tired to do because, according to her, it was my responsibility to make her life easier. Meanwhile, my dad just sat back, allowing her to push all the burdens onto me without offering any support. I remember him saying he didn't want to deal with anything, that it was easier for him to leave everything to her. It was so unfair. My childhood, my teen years, those should have been about growth and discovery, but instead I was thrust into a role I wasn't prepared for. Then came the time when everything came crashing down. I had to quit my job because the store manager had been sexually harassing me. I felt humiliated, trapped, and helpless. Instead of understanding, my parents were furious that I wasn't bringing in any money. They didn't care about what had happened to me. All they cared about was their own financial problems. They wanted me to hurry up and find a new job, as if the emotional toll of dealing with the harassment didn't matter. It didn't stop there. They kicked me out multiple times. Every time I had a setback or couldn't meet their expectations, they would throw me out. The last time, after I was forced to leave my job, I called my then boyfriend, now my husband, to come pick me up. He was the only one who truly cared, the only one who saw the pain I was going through. I had to walk out of the house barefoot, without a single pair of shoes on my feet because they wouldn't even let me put them on. They told me to leave everything behind. My dad, cold and indifferent, said, "I bought everything here, so leave without it." The irony is, it wasn't even true. My father hadn't bought everything. I had contributed, and I had tried to help out as best as I could, but none of that mattered to them. They just saw me as a burden, someone who wasn't living up to their expectations, and so I was discarded. That was the point when I realized, after all the abuse, after all the emotional turmoil, I had to make a choice. I could either continue to let them control me, keep me in that toxic cycle, or I could break free and build a life where I was valued, where I was loved and treated with respect. I chose to leave. I chose to walk away from the people who were supposed to be my family, the people who, instead of lifting me up, only tore me down. It was hard, it hurt, I felt guilty like I was abandoning them, but I knew deep down that it was the only way to save myself. And over the years, I have never regretted that decision. Leaving was the best thing I ever did for myself. It allowed me to start over, to heal, to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy, nothing worth doing ever is, but in time, I found love, support, and a sense of self-worth that I had never experienced growing up in that environment. You are not a failure for wanting to leave. You are not a bad person for prioritizing your own mental, emotional, and physical well-being. If anything, you are incredibly strong for recognizing that you deserve more, that you deserve better. Your worth is not determined by what others think of you or how they treat you. You have the power to create a life where you are in control, where you are loved for who you truly are. I know it's scary, I know it feels like you're walking away from everything you've known, but trust me when I say that this will be the first step toward your freedom. The moment you stop allowing them to dictate your life, you'll begin to breathe easier, you'll begin to heal, you'll start seeing that you are worth so much more than they ever gave you credit for. So please don't doubt yourself, keep moving forward. You have the strength, the resilience, and the courage to break free from this toxic environment. You deserve happiness, peace, and a life where you are respected and loved. Take that step and know that even though it may be difficult, it will be worth it in the end. Update 5. I was in a situation very similar to yours. I can feel the weight of it, the constant tension, the emotional abuse that seems never ending. My mom would scream at me over the smallest things, insult me, or even lash out physically for reasons that made no sense. It was like I was walking on eggshells every single day, never knowing when the next outburst would come, always trying to avoid the next confrontation. And my dad? He'd just sit there, silent unless she specifically told him to intervene. Most of the time, he'd simply refuse to get involved, saying something like, "If I get involved, we'll be divorced in a second." It was his way of distancing himself, of avoiding the conflict. But in doing so, he left me and my brother to bear the brunt of her wrath alone. It was infuriating. I wish he had stepped up. I wish he had taken a stand, but he didn't. And so, I was left to figure things out on my own, with no real guidance or support. When I finally left, I had enough. I called my mom out on everything. On the insults, the emotional manipulation, the way she twisted every situation to make herself the victim. And I turned to my dad too. I told him he had been a doormat for years, that he'd let her walk all over him and control everything. I pointed out how his inability to stand up for himself had created a toxic environment for us, especially for me and my brother. My dad was manic depressive, and on top of that, borderline personality disorder. My mom, a textbook narcissist. It was one of the worst combinations you could have, and it made everything so much more difficult. My dad couldn't express his emotions, and my mom had this overwhelming, inflated sense of her own importance. She made sure everyone knew her opinion was the only one that mattered. I told my dad that he needed to stop letting her dominate everything. I told him that his opinion meant so much more than hers. For years, he had let her control the narrative, and it had affected all of us. But the truth was, he had never steered me wrong. On the other hand, my mom, she had never done anything but insult me, tear me down, and make me feel worthless. I told him, as hard as it was, that I wished he had divorced her long ago. Maybe then I could have had a chance at a happier life. Maybe he could have been happy. I think deep down he knew he'd made a mistake by staying. It wasn't an easy thing to say, but it was the truth. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. But even though it hurt, things started to improve once I moved away. It was like the air cleared and space allowed us to heal. It was only when I moved 1,000 miles away from them, seeing them only 2 or 3 times a year, that things began to shift. It felt like a lifetime of pain was finally starting to loosen its grip. My brother and I, even though we were older, started to rebuild our relationship with our parents in a way that was healthier, more balanced. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but it was better. It hurts to know that it took me physically distancing myself from them, leaving everything I knew behind to make the situation better. I didn't want it to be this way. I wanted my parents to get along, to be the family I had always dreamed of. But sometimes you're just not meant to be where you start. That's something I've had to accept, and that's okay. Life is messy, people are messy, but sometimes the only way forward is to take a step back and find a new path. I don't regret leaving. I regret the way it all unfolded, but I don't regret the decision to leave. It was the only way I could finally start to live the life I deserved. And I believe you deserve that too. It's painful now, but one day when you look back, you'll see that it was the turning point. It was the moment you took control of your life and your future. That's the power you have. You're stronger than you think. And in time, it will all make sense.